You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MIAX is proud to bring you Spikes Volatility products. Spikes options and futures are traded on the Spikes Volatility Index, SPIKE, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about Spikes at myaxoptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again to view some volatility. Yes, it is time for Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the Options Insider Radio Network. So many ways for you guys to access the content these days. It's pretty much available on demand on just about every platform under the sun. Apple, Google, Spotify, Audible, YouTube, you name it. If it's got audio content on it, it's probably got our stuff on it. And, of course, you can get live access throughout the week with the plus over there, theoptionsinsider.com/plus. You want to go above and beyond, including getting options oddities in your ear holes exclusively a little bit later today. Great pro Q&As. You guys have asked us to bring back the short vol legend, Mr. Don. This time, because he'd drop a hint if you guys wanted to. He would come back to bust out his Blackjack Hall of Famer persona and do a full-on 100% all questions answered high-level blackjack pro Q&A. He has agreed to do so by popular request. He's going to be here next Tuesday in the pro Q&A to do that. It's going to be pretty awesome. So you guys are already started hitting us up with your questions. I'm not talking splitting aces. I'm talking serious high-level pro blackjack playing. He has repeatedly insisted to me over the years that blackjack is the most profitable per-minute legal activity you could do. So he likes it. He takes it very seriously. He's in the Hall of Fame for a reason. So we're going to get into all of that on Tuesday's Pro Q&A. If you're not part of the secret club, theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn more. And let's see who we're hearing from on the old program today. First, let's go out to the land of MIAX. We are joined once again in the MIAX hot seat by our old friend, your regular day-to-day host over there on OPR. He's moonlighting today on Volatility Views, Mr. Brian Overby, a.k.a. the options guy over there at Ally Invest. Brian, welcome back to Volatility Views.
It's great to be back. I'd love to be on Volatility Views whenever we break through that 20 level in the VIX, and we did it again today. So happy to be here to talk some vol.
It's like you knew. It's like you knew that was coming today. That's why you signed up for today. Your crystal ball pretty precise over there. We'll see how it's working later on in the show. And also joining us from deep in the heart of Texas, the southern volatility capital, if you will. We are joined once again by the greasiest of meatballs, the Volatility Brisket, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. Mr. Meatball / Brisket, welcome back to Volatility Views, sir.
Good to be here. I'm excited. We got ourselves a day on our hands, don't we?
We got a little bit of stuff to parse, so let's get to it. It is time for the Volatility Review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Vol Review, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down the week that was, and indeed still is, evolving minute by minute. That's the volatility business. Don't like what's going on? Wait 5 minutes. You'll get something else. Of course, a lot of stuff popping off this week and indeed today. Coming into today's show, seeing a little bit of that green coming back off the screen. Markets are firmly in the red now to end the week here after a lot of vacillation throughout the week. Yesterday was a sell-off and then turned into a rally. Rest of the week, we had all sorts of interesting action. And today, firmly back in the red. S&P, once again, the Goldilocks, off about 0.75%. Pretty much exactly. The NASDAQ leading the charge, off about 0.85%, and the Dow struggling to get off about 0.5%. It's off about 0.4%, a little more than 0.4% right now. Of course, all of that red on the screen means we got vol pretty much getting a bit of a lift, even though it's less of a lift than it was earlier in the session. We did, as Brian alluded to, we did have VIX north of the 20 handle heading into the start of the show. It has given some of that back now. It's back just ever so briefly, ever so modestly below the 20 handles. Around a 19 3/4 when we kicked off the show. That still puts it up nearly 2 points, about 1 3/4 points from this time last week. Spikes was still holding at about a 20. I think it actually may have just broken it when we kicked off the show, like a 1999, something along those lines. So right at the 20 level in Spikes as well. It's pushed it up about 2 points from where it was this time last week. And VVIX pretty much right around where it was this time last week. It was pretty frothy last week, and it's pretty frothy still this week at about a 118. It's actually down a point from this time last week, but still a pretty elevated level. Let's go back on out to the MIAX hot seat. Mr. Brian, it's been a while since you've joined us. A lot has gone on in the world of volatility. A lot is going on this week as we speak. What has been lighting up your tape in the world of volatility, sir?
Well, Apple, Apple has had been in the news recently, and actually it's been a theme on some of the shows that we've talked about inside the Ally Invest platform on our YouTube channel. We've discussed Apple, and just in general, it's September. Usually get a little bit more volatility, and volatility doesn't necessarily mean that it's a down month overall, but then again, in September, we are down a little bit. Always seems to be the case. It's not necessarily planned, but it always seems like we do get a little bit of a spike up in volatility and a little bit of a down move in the market. So looking at a lot of these gains that a lot of people have had on stocks since the beginning of the year, a lot of them in the FANG stocks in general. Balls are up a little bit. Apple gave up a little, talking a little bit about some protection, some things that we can do in going into the year's end, specifically using the options and option strategies overall.
Yeah, Apple has certainly been a big player, particularly in the weeklies. We've been breaking it down on our Options Oddities program. We'll probably get to it again this week because, of course, Apple had their big announcement. Like it often does, it seems like it came in like a lion and kind of came out with a whimper. People are like, yeah, that's kind of what we expected. New iPhones, new iPads, big whoop. Stock kind of didn't really rebound, didn't really have a resounding response to it. Of course, it's the old buy the rumor, sell the news kind of thing out there, but still some paper lighting it up. We'll get to it a little bit later today on the Options Oddities, what's going on in the weeklies, because it has been just a tsunami of very, very near-dated paper out there in Apple. People have been speculating for a while. Why is it? Is it because of this announcement? Was it because of the impending results of the Epic litigation? We've seen both of those happen now, and we're still seeing paper. So intriguing stuff nonetheless. Let's go on out now, back deep into the heart of Texas. Mr. Meatball, sir, what has been lighting up your tape on this topsy-turvy week in volatility, where, as Brian alluded to, we did once again see a 20 handle in VIX?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're about $8 as we're recording this. We're about $8 off of the 50-day moving average, which has been a trampoline for the S&P. The VIX, despite being over 20, I think we both agree it feels a little anemic today. Feels a little meh today. I'd like to see it be a little peppier. It's not, and part of that is because it's already 20. But the high on the VIX was, last week, despite the fact that this week has been pretty much just straight down all week. And it's interesting. The vol's going up near 120 again. NASDAQ vol's gone up. Vols across the board. Brian brings up Apple. Apple is getting kind of slapped around, and yet the vol is super inexpensive if you want to put plays on relative to how this thing is moving. I'm seeing index vol really, despite its anemic move, it is overpriced relative to what the S&P is doing. But on the equity side, it's kind of the opposite. We see some of these big names moving around and not a lot of people running after the premium.
No, and we saw some interesting developments over the course of this past week. We have seen multiple days. They're not frequent, but we have seen multiple days in the past where we have seen, let's say, the markets up and VIX and volatility tending to drift up a little bit as well. We don't often see it in the other direction where the markets are selling off and vol also comes in, but we did see it ever so briefly yesterday for pretty much as long as the sell-off lasted in the markets. It seems like vol knew what the broad indices did, and vol knew that this was just a tempest in the teapot and it was going to turn green. And certainly that did, because vol was pretty much selling off the entirety of the day. They were just like, sell off. What sell off? Brian, I know just from our own experience, whenever these types of days happen, whenever VIX and the S&P move in the same direction, we tend to get flooded with a lot of questions about how is that possible? What is going on? I'm sure you had something similar over there at Ally this past week. Anything come to mind as you saw these two indexes moving in lockstep ever so briefly, sir?
Well, yeah, to me, it's just one indicator, not a determining factor overall, that the market just isn't believing in the move that is happening. So like if we see a big up day, but we also see implied volatility going up, a lot of times it just means that the marketplace isn't 100% behind what is actually going on in the S&P 500 index. And I even think it is more appropriate when you see the markets going down. I think there's a little bit more weight behind it. Now, once again, you want to look at everything else. It's just one little indicator. But when you see things like that happening, specifically in the VIX, it's a little contrarian. And sometimes it can just be caused by a news event, Fed speaking, something going on. But in general, when you see that usually, to me, is saying the marketplace isn't really believing in the move. And if it's a down move, they're expecting a bounce back before the end of the market or over the next day or so. But in general, that's always what when we see them moving in tandem in the same direction, that I get that feeling from the marketplace overall.
And Mark, I'm sure this was a big discussion point over there in the land of the pit yesterday. What were your thoughts on that ever so brief period where it seems like vol knew what the rest of the market didn't, Mark? And then, of course, everything caught up to vol at the end of the day.
Yeah, it was definitely eyebrow raising. I really thought we were going to come in and rally hard today. I got to be honest, the way the market was off big, vol wasn't doing anything. It rallied to actually green on the day and then gave it away a little bit. Looking at the price action, I was like, it's going to be a typical triple witching where, maybe we open down a little bit and then they run it hard. And it has been the exact opposite of that. They opened it down a little bit and then ran it hard down.
They did indeed. Let's see what's moving up or down in the land of volatility futures. We'll start out there in Spikes futures. Looks like volume pretty steady. This is the first week in a while I didn't get a new volume record out there, which is in and of itself a bit of a breaking of the pattern out there. But looks like numbers are still pretty frothy out there in the land of Spikes futures, which again is good. We want tight options markets. It starts with the underlying, and we're seeing much better numbers out there in the land of the Spikes futures. Moving on out to VIX futures. Coming into showtime, of course, SEP going off the board this week. So ACH moves up to the pole position there now. The ACH future, up slightly coming into showtime. Not even a quarter of a point, really. So not a huge evolution on the front portion of the curve. The NOV future now firmly on our radar here. That's up a little bit more, about a third of a point. But again, not a huge evolution in that front portion of the curve since last week. Mr. Meatball, anything catching your eye in the land of the volatility futures this week, sir?
Yeah, the curve itself was pretty much normal for once at the end of the day yesterday. We have about 33 days to go yesterday, and the October future was trading about 2 points above, kind of what I would expect. And then today we have seen the curve flatten up significantly, although we're still trading over a point above the cash. So there is plenty of room for the cash to rise before we really, really start to get some lift out of the VIX futures. VIX futures are, not even at the October future is not even at the high for the last 2 weeks with where VIX is trading. So, like I said, there is, we have a flattening curve, but it is still pretty normal, still in a contango, and we'll see where we go from here. I really, really am interested in the close today and how we trade.
Yes, it's an interesting one out there. Let's see what's interesting from an overall options perspective. Getting a lot more paper lighting it up out there in spikes options, which is good to see. Probably a direct result of all those futures that have been going up of late. The OI up to, let's do a top 6. Why not? All these pretty much lining up. Looks like we had some new paper flying in this week as well. We had, looks like the OC 23 puts going up for around $4, so pretty meaty against the OC 2632 half vertical. It's like paper did it 400 times on Wednesday, and they came back in and did it 1,000 more times, so a total of 1,400 on each of those 3 legs out there. So a lot of paper, and surprisingly, usually a lot of the spikes paper is leaning towards the upside. They're selling the put to fund the upside vertical. This time it seems like it's the other way around. Looks like paper selling that vertical and buying that very meaty, dare I say it, meefy mark, $4 put in spikes going out there on the 20th. Yeah, this is interesting because we don't see a lot of fading to the downside paper in spikes. So interesting stuff. Looking at the top positions out there in spikes land, the number one position now with 1,400 is that 1,400 each is that OC 23 put versus the 2632 half call spread. Then we got 1,000 each of the 17 put versus the 2330 vertical. I'm pretty sure, I'll have to go back and check. I'm pretty sure that one was on the other way, selling the put to buy the vertical, but we can go investigate and find out because that's the way a lot of the spikes paper, and indeed a lot of the volatility paper, tends to go up fading to the upside. But these days, of course, there is a lot of erosion. Folks want to play to the downside as well. Moving on out to VIX options. Let's see where folks are playing out there. Upside, downside, what's lighting it up? Let's do a quick breakdown of the top open positions first before we get into what's been trading this week. OI looking good. Again, we have some paper rolling off the board this week, so that took some OI with it. It cost you only 106,000 contracts to break into the top 10 right now in VIX land. By the way, that top 10, 60-40 puts to calls, so no longer are we evenly split in the top VIX positions out there. That number 10 spot belongs to a call, 106,000 of the Feb, the first and only Feb on the board this week. Feb, 65 calls, 106,000 of those from number 10. Number 9, also 106,000 of the October 21 puts. Number 8, 113,000 of the October 16 puts. Number 7, $1.20 of the October 18 puts. Number 6, our second of 4 calls in the top 10, 130,000 of the NOV 20s. A couple of NOVs here on the top 10 this week. Number 5, 145,000 of the NOV 17 puts. And then we've got number 4, we've got the OC 50s, 5-0s, 177,000 of those bad boys open. Number 3, it's one of my favorites on the top 10. You know this, 200,000 almost exactly of the NOV 60s. Those have been open for a while. And they remain one of these sizable positions in VIX land. And number 2, OC 14 puts, 232,000 of those. And number 1 with a decent size bullet out there, no longer a 22, 276,000 of the October 17 puts. Total of almost exactly 6 million contracts outstanding, which again, if you know anything about VIX, that's pretty light. That's, you're talking about 3.85 million on the calls and let's say about 2.15 or so, maybe 2.25 million on the puts out there. So still call biased, but intriguing stuff nonetheless. Mr. Brian, I know you guys watch VIX out there on the land of Ally. I'm sure you get a lot of questions about it these days. Anything lighting up your tape in the world of VIX options this week, sir?
Well, not in particular a specific strike or a specific trade that is going on. But anytime when we get that VIX back up around the 20 level, we always get a lot of questions in the marketplace about what does that mean? Where are we going to next? And it's just really weird that we've developed this line in the sand ever since the big downturn that was caused by the pandemic. And whenever we seem to get up over that 20% level, people just always seem to start getting nervous about the marketplace. And that nervousness seems to drive trading overall. A lot more questions. I just feel like our clients are getting a little bit more bearish, but then again, it is September. So is it just a seasonality thing overall? But the questions that I receive on a lot of my programs and on my shows are a lot about how do I protect positions overall, and hence the themes of a lot of our education that we're doing here over at Ally Invest in general.
Well, let's see if the VIX options paper falls in line with that as well. Today, not a ton of paper on the tape, only 214,000 contracts. Looks like the big trade is a NOV 1621 put spread going up about 15,000 times today. Also got about 12,000 contracts to number 3 of the NOV 18 puts. Number 4, 11,000 of the NOV 22 calls. Round out the top 5, such as it is today, about 10,600 of the OC 50s. Again, the OC 50s popping up there. Yesterday, a little bit more paper on the tape, not much. Remember, I said on the option block, looked like it was going to be an anemic day. That turned out to be the case. Only 269,000 contracts on the tape yesterday. The big trade yesterday, OC 17 puts, 18,000 of those, followed by 16,000 of the OC 21 puts. It's an interesting 15,000 for number 3 of the DEES 90s, 9-0. Always those fun strikes popping in there out of nowhere, listeners. Number 4, 14,000 of the OC 30 calls, and rounding out the top 5 yesterday, 12,500 of the OC 19 puts. I do like those DEES 90s, though. Those are interesting. Wednesday, a little bit more active. In fact, the second most active day of the week so far. 694,000 contracts on the tape. The big trade on Wednesday. My old friend, the NOV 60s, lighting it up to the tune of nearly 52,000 contracts on Wednesday, followed by number 2. The aforementioned Feb 65s. 50,000 exactly. You never see that. You usually see 50,001. There's something lurking in the book somewhere to add on. Nope. 50,000 exactly of the Feb 65 calls. Number 3, 41, almost 42,000 of the DEES 35s. Number 4, 34,000 of the DEES 30s. Getting a bit of a pattern here to Wednesday's paper. And number 5 on Wednesday, 32,000 of the DEES 25 calls. That's a pretty hefty call strip of NOV and DEES and a little bit of Feb calls there on Wednesday. Tuesday, also a pretty active day, 621,000 contracts on the tape. The most active contract, DEES 26s, with about almost 25,000 contracts on the tape, followed by 24,000 of the SEP 19 puts. Number 3, 23,000 of the SEP 20 calls. Number 4, 22, almost about 22,000, almost exactly, of the OC 21 calls. And let's see, number 5, 18, almost 19,000 of the SEP 22s. Monday, the most active day of the week. You don't see that too often. 751,000 contracts on the tape. The big trade on Monday, 53,000 of the SEP 20s, followed by another fun strike, 50,025. See, that's what I expect. I expect 50,000 and a few extra. Never 50,000 exactly. 50,025 of the Jan 75s. Getting back to the fun strike, listeners. Number 3, almost 42,000 of the NOV 60s. Again, my favorite strikes out there. Number 4, 37, almost 38,000 of the SEP 18 puts. And rounding out the top 5 on the most active day of the week, Monday, 37,000 of the SEP 25 calls. Mark, we had quite the variety of strikes, quite the variety of trades going up this week as VIX kind of meandered back and forth, up and down throughout the week. We got DEES 90s, we got SEP 17, all over the place. What lit up your tape out there in VIX options this week, sir?
Yeah, I think that November 60 was actually maybe attached to the DEES 90s as like a weird spread. There's been a lot of like way out of the money call buying, and then just it's been kind of a put palooza. I'm also unimpressed by the volume that we've seen this week. ADV is down to 358. Open interest is only 6 million. We're a full 25% below average open interest in the VIX. Today, right? VIX up 2, we're over 20. There's 200,000 contracts today. Puts and calls are trading 1-to-1. The lack of, let's say, racing to cover, I think shows you how why paying attention to the skew index, something we don't talk about very much, is so important. And it shows you that people are engaging in put buying in the S&P 500, and they're buying them left and right, and that's been holding VIX up, and is one of the reasons why the sell-offs feel more Malaise-ey than maybe one would expect.
I like that. Malaise-ey. We're coining phrases all the time here on the network, listeners. Let's keep on rolling out there to the products you folks typically love to fade. Not so much on the fade this week. VXX coming into Showtime was at 26, almost exactly. That puts it up about a third of a point from where it was this time last week. Obviously, the erosion is starting to kick in, so wait a few minutes and maybe we'll get a little bit of a downside on the screen by the end of the day. A decent paper out there in VXX. Yet another day where it seems like the tail is wagging the dog. VIX only had about 214,000 contracts. VXX already up to 285,000 contracts. So once again, VXX outpacing the mothership of VIX out there. The ADV also ticking up almost 240,000. It's about 239,000 right now. It's up about 17,000 contracts from this time last week. So some folks are coming to play in the land of VXX. Let's see where they're lining up right now. Top 10 positions out there. Looks like we have four of the top 10 now are the pre-split adjusted VXX1. So that number is slowly dwindling, but not slow enough, unfortunately. Let's see. Let's go out to number 10. We've got 18,000 of the VXX1, the pre-split adjusted Jan 12 puts. Then number 9, 20,000 of the OC 28 calls. Number 8, 21,000 of the SEP 25 puts. Number 7, 21,500 of the, again, VXX1 SEP 14 calls. Number 6, 22,000 of the OC 25 puts. Number 5, 22,000 as well of the SEP 24 puts. Number 4, got a whole bunch of 22,000s here, only delineated by a few hundred contracts each. Number 4, the SEP 23 puts, also 22,000. Number 3, also 22,000 of the the SEP 9 puts, also VXX1. So thankfully, some of these are going the way of the dodo today. And then we got number 2, 27,000 of the SEP 40s. And number 1 with a bullet out there this week, we've got the SEP 10 calls, VXX1 again, going out today, thankfully. So we will see a lot of adjustment next week. No more of these pre-split adjusted names, at least far fewer of them in the top 10 here. In terms of what's active out there today, looks like it's pretty much all paper going the way of the dodo today, which you would expect. The number 1 contract out there today, 21,500 of the SEP 26 puts, followed by 15,000 of the SEP 25 puts, 14,000 of the SEP 26 calls, almost 14,000 of the SEP 25 half puts, and rounding out the top 5 today, the only non-SEP contract going up today in the top 5, the NOV 18 puts, 10,500 of those bad boys. Mr. Brian, do you guys over there at Ally, you tend to watch a lot of these products that tend to play around VIX and the ones that people love to fade vol through like VXX and UVXY? And if so, what's been lighting up your tape this week, sir?
Well, the VXX is something that our clients do like to follow. I don't talk about it as much. I usually like to focus more so on the VIX in general, as opposed to talking about the ETNs that are out there that are always tracking it. I mean, if you look at the VXX just in general, it's down about 60%, I think, from the beginning of the year overall. So to see a lot of the volume coming in the puts, that kind of makes sense to me overall, just in general, just the way the product works. And that's where we see the bulk of our attention in the VXX. A lot of times our clients just kind of think like the VXX is just easier to understand. Is the options that are trading on it, the whole concept behind just getting a quote, and that's where that underlying is trading at, is kind of a solid thing for basic retail customers like we have that want to dip their toe into the volatility area. But with that said, I still think that the VIX overall is one of the more interesting products for our clients, but they do have a tendency to dip their toes in the VXX, and I do understand why we see that volume and a lot of that volume coming in, and it seems to be coming in on the put side.
Mr. Meatball, same question for you, sir. Anything lighting up the tapes of your crazies in the pitch chat in VXX this week, sir?
Yeah, it's been all over the board, hasn't it? It's been, and this is why people get into trouble when they try and trade VXX, right? Here we have the VIX at 20. It's been strong all week. And if you went back to the 10th, which was last Friday, and said, boy, I think the market's going to sell off and I want to go long vol, I'm going to buy VXX, you would be the owner of a nice 50-cent loss in VXX. It's pretty impressive how quickly that thing dies. I would note that implied volatility on VXX is really starting to get frothy. And that, there is some dabbling in this thing. People starting to make some real calculated bets that we could see a blow off the top.
Let's see if we're seeing any calculated bets in the product you folks love to fade, perhaps even more, dare I say it, than VXX. It is UVXY coming into showtime, 22.5, up about a quarter from where it was this time last week. I got a feeling that will probably be a little bit lower right now. Actually, no, getting a little bit of steam back, 23 back up there again now. So that actually puts it up even more, about 3/4 of a point from where it was this time last week. So getting a little bit of juice back in the old UVXY, which is interesting. Coming into today's show, we had ADV also ticking up to about 144,000 contracts, up slightly, about 7,000 from this time last week, but better than trending in the other direction. And today, about 173,000 contracts, which is decent paper for UVXY. It's not quite beating VIX, but it's pretty darn close. And again, it's well north of that ADV, which is a trend we like to see out there. Let's see what's lighting it up out there today. Oh, before we get to that, let's break down. Let's do a top 5 out here in UVXY because these positions aren't as big as, let's say, a VIX. Number 5 out there, again, UVXY1, pre-split adjusted 9,300 of the Jan 1 puts, 1.0 puts. I love that strike. Unfortunately, those will be with us for some time. Number 4, 9,300 as well of the SEP 75s. Going back to these bad boys, I keep meaning to explore this portion of the UVXY options chain every week. And every week I get busy and called away to something else, probably doing a show for you folks out there. But whoever's harvesting all of that juice to the upside in UVXY, they're getting a ridiculous amount, and they're clearly up to it. These bad boys going away today, SEP 75s. It'd be interesting to see what strike he comes back on now, because this person or people have been just tearing up the upside in UVXY and getting a shocking amount of premium to do so. Number 3, 9,600 of the SEP 60s. Again, the upside juice there. Number 2, 9,800 of the SEP 19 puts. And the number 1 position out there, thankfully going the way of the dodo today, 14,000 of the SEP 21 puts. Actually, no, these are UVXY as well. So these are not pre-split adjusted. So we have the regular old SEP 21 puts going the way of the dodo 14,000 times. Be interesting to see how this top 10 is reshaped this time next week. In terms of what folks are lighting up out there in UVXY, the number 1 trade today, again, pretty much all of these outside of the last one are all expiring today. We got the SEP 22s, 10,600. Number 2, 9,600 of the SEP 22 puts. Number 3, 9,100 of the SEP 21 puts. Number 4, 9,000 almost exactly of the SEP 23 calls. And rounding out the top 5 most active contracts today, 8,300 of the SEP expiring next week on the 24th, 20 puts. Mr. Meatball, I know you favor UVXY these days, as do the crazies in your pitch chat. What's been lighting up your tape out there in the land of UVXY, sir? Getting a little bit of steam back as the show has progressed.
Yeah, it is. We did see the market has butted up against the 50-day moving average now multiple times today. And it's managed to hold. But yeah, UVXY, again, it's nice and frothy. If you want to call, the rally that it had today frothy. But again, the high for the day on last Friday was 2406. It closed 2386. So if you were saying to yourself, boy, I think the market's going to sell off, I'm going to buy UVXY. You are an unhappy camper because you are currently off about 75 cents. This is why you don't buy UVXY because you think we might get a sell-off. You buy UVXY when we are getting a sell-off. And then you got to be on top of it because that it is a fleeting opportunity of long volatility, and it dies as quickly as it rises.
Yeah, right back to the 23 strike. So kind of hitting the reset button on the week. So you had your moments, all of you who were fading to the downside. We got into the 21 handle ever so briefly, but once again, hits the reset button right here on expiration. So UVXY and VXX, they giveth and they taketh away. Seems like they're taking some of that back right now. Let's go on out to the land of earnings volatility. Not a ton on the tape for this week. Kind of a quiet week. We had Oracle on Monday. Everyone's favorite Ibex. These are the names we're getting now. On Tuesday, Weber Grill on Wednesday, and of course, everyone's favorite, Manchester United on Friday. So today. So if you wanted to sling some football/soccer volatility, you had your chance today here. Really quickly, let's look ahead to see. We do have some names popping off next week. Got the reports here from our friends over there in Orat's land. Man, if you're wondering what kind of juice are they pricing into a soccer franchise? Man U coming into their announcement was at $17.50. They were pricing in 60 cents. In the past, they've moved 64 cents. So it doesn't seem like there's a lot of juice really either way to be wrung from a soccer franchise. But nonetheless, there it is. Next week, Mr. Meatball, you like this one. Darden Restaurants, your favorites. Let's see. They're before the bell on the 23rd. They were trading at $149, pretty much even. They were pricing in $7.39. In the past, they moved $9.52. So taking off more than $2 off that straddle. And again, given the performance we've seen out there, aside from the last few weeks of this season, it's kind of hard to argue with doing that. Rite Aid, a.k.a. RAD, they're also on the 23rd before the bell. $17.89 is where they were heading into this report. They were pricing in $176. In the past, they moved $2.75. They shipped a whole $1 out of that straddle. Not much blood left to be wrung from that stone, but they're managing to do it. We'll see if that's the proper way to go. Costco also on the 23rd after the bell. $4.60 3/4 is where they were at this time of this report. They were pricing in a little bit more juice, actually. That's interesting. 12 1/4. In the past, they moved about 11 1/4. So they've added $1. Rite Aid has stripped $1 from their already cheap $2.75 straddle, and Costco has added $1 to their $11.25 straddle, now trading 12 1/4. So is that the right play? We'll find out. Nike also on the 23rd after the bell. 157, almost 158 is where they were trading as of this report. They were pricing in about 820. In the past, they've moved about 930. So a little bit less juice, which again, if past is prologue, is probably the right trade. Even though, as I say that, I'm looking at the updated earnings season numbers, listeners, and the last couple of weeks have made this the best season we've seen in quite some time, pretty much since the start of the pandemic. Week 1 is what you expect, 76%, so a little bit of red on the screen there. Week 2 was terrible, 57%. You pretty much got cut in half. Week 3, 67%, getting a little bit better, still terrible. Week 4, outperformance, 107%. We don't see a lot of strips of green on these reports. In fact, it's been a while, but we got 2 this season. And then week 5, at pretty much break even at 100%, which is still marked green, just for fun here. So right now, the season is holding firm at about an 86%. That means if you bought the basket of all the earnings volatility, all the straddles out there, listeners, you got back about 86%. That's just on the initial movement. That's not talking about how deft you are at a gamma scalping or anything like that. That's just straight up looking at the numbers. 86% is again, you're still losing money, but it's a heck of a lot less than you were, let's say, a few seasons ago when it was coming in at 60% or something along those lines. So is this the moment we have been waiting for? I don't know. Matt seems to think so. And, he does crunch the numbers. So I tend to lean towards what he's thinking from an earnings vol perspective. But again, I've been burned by that. I've come out before in earnings season. So I think maybe this is the moment. And then just vol gets annihilated even more aggressively out there. Mr. Brian, I know earnings season tends to be a big driver for paper, for firms like yours. You were talking about Apple before. Apple obviously still doesn't need an earnings season for Apple to dominate the tape. Apple just has a day that ends in Y, and they're going to put up some numbers. If you have anything more on Apple, have at it. Then also some other names popping off. We got Rite Aid, we got Costco. And what are your thoughts? Do you think these earnings numbers, I think these are going to hold up? Are we going to start seeing names outperform again from an earnings vol perspective? Or is this just a little bit of a blip before the annihilation continues, sir?
Well, okay. So to go all the way back to the beginning of the show, when Mark kind of talked about Apple and where the volatility is at relative to where the market volatility is at, that's one of the things that we were pointing out on a lot of our shows, in that if you do have a lot of these stocks that have had made decent run-ups, we're not necessarily in earnings season with Apple and a lot of the FANG stocks overall, that buying some protection going into year end is fairly cheap. And I find that also, as Mark was saying, kind of interesting. Like, why are these particular stocks trading at about the same volatility as the actual VIX index or the S&P 500 index overall? So buying protection is, I guess, the moral to my story. And even from talking about these earnings announcements in a lot of the retail stocks overall, we've focused a lot on retails in our weekly newsletter that we put out inside our Ally Invest community, where supply and demand issues are really becoming a factor. Are we going to get inflation? Is it going to be caused because people can't get product overall? But yet we're still seeing volatilities come down. So is there opportunities to buy some vol? Well, as you say, in general, going into earnings, it's usually not a good proposition to be buying volatility overall. But what about after earnings? What about buying some vol in after these announcements? Once we get that little bit of a sell-off, looking into either the put side or the call side, wherever you want to be. I'm just saying that in general, in these retail stocks, and two of them that you mentioned right now are Costco and Nike, I do expect to see more volatility than what the marketplace is implying right now. And that always sets you up for a different opportunity. And you want to look for strategies in the options world that will take advantage of implied volatilities going up. Overall, just in general, we could just get a whole lift in the marketplace in a lot of these retail stocks, because there's a lot of news that's going to be coming out and hitting the tape, and supply concerns are a real concern in the retail market space.
And Mr. Meatball, I know when you're not talking to us, you're out there slinging the gamma radar. Anything intriguing coming across your tape these days as we start to wind down this earnings season, sir?
Yeah, well, we already talked about Apple and the fact that you're not really seeing a lot of juice there. There's the amount of individual equities on a day where the VIX is up 2 points that are hitting 52-week low implied volatilities is absolutely shocking to me. This is all index, and it's all beta. Individual names there's no volatility. TLT, the bond ETF, it is down. Its implied volatility is down. Gold is down. Gold vol is down. There's literally nowhere to hide, and that is the truth. I mean, it's weird. Equities with the Robinhood, this is something we're going to have to get used to. Vol goes up when they go up and seems to just kind of placate when they drop. And that, I think, is one of the big observations that we've made. I am going long as I possibly can, Darden Restaurants, because you guys know how much I love.
You love those biscuits.
There's nothing I like more than dockside chicken at the Red Lobster with some cheesy biscuits. Oh, wait, they don't own Red Lobster anymore, do they?
Oh, they spun it off? Oh, I thought they still owned it.
They sold it at a really bad price.
That might explain why I just saw an ad for Red Lobster yesterday. We have all a bunch of other stuff outside of fish. They're advertising like salads now. I was like, is this Red Lobster? So that would explain it.
Well, all right. So everyone knows that, I go for the salad and breadstick meal every day at lunch at the Olive Garden.
Well, it looks like Golden Gate Capital for $2.1 billion they sold it off to.
Well, as long as they keep the biscuits, that's really the only reason anybody goes to that place, right? I think even in the commercial, the guy said, "Aren't you the biscuit people?" So, yeah, apparently they're trying to break away from that mold. As we break on into your questions, it is time for the Volatility voicemail.
It's time to share your thoughts and opinions with your fellow volatility traders. It's time to check the Volatility voicemail. Make your voice heard by dialing 779-669-4VOL. Posting a comment on the optionsinsider.com, sending an email to questions@theoptionsinsider.com, or posting your questions to twitter.com/options. or facebook.com/The Options Insider.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Vol voicemail. Your questions are pouring in. We'll get to those in 2 seconds. I just want to pay off our question of the week right now. It is coming to its conclusion. If you listen on demand, you might still have time. It's got about 4 hours left. You definitely have time if you're listening live now. And right now, we're asking you a very reductive but fun question. We thought, everyone should use the Greeks. They should inform every aspect of your options trading. But in practice, people tend to focus on different Greeks depending on how they trade, what their position is, all sorts of reasons. So we thought, just quite simply, which Greek do you find yourself using the most in your options trading? Gave you the obvious 4 choices: Delta, Gamma, Theta, Vega. We said no write-ins for Rho. In spite of that, Uncle Mike wrote in for Rho, so he gets rejected from the poll. His vote does not count anymore. But interesting stuff, some interesting responses out there as well. Brian, we'll go out to you right now as our resident educator extraordinaire out there. If you have a vote for which Greek you find yourself using the most, have at it. And then more importantly, what do you think our audience is voting for?
Okay. Well, I'm sure if I had to go with the audience, I'm guessing Delta, because that's the big Greek that is out there. But my what I talk about the most when I'm educating, and I have this highlighted inside the options playbook, the whole section on the Greeks, is Gamma. I spend more time talking about Gamma, but not necessarily looking at the actual number of Gamma, but just understanding the concept, the acceleration that's behind Delta. And I spend a lot of time just explaining the concept. And then I say, now, if you get the concept, well, then you don't really need to look at Gamma anymore overall, but you just need to understand. So that's by far my favorite Greek. And even within Ally Invest, we named all the conference rooms different Greek letters overall. So, Gamma is my favorite conference room too.
I like that. I want to go to the Gamma conference room one of these days. No Rho. I'm not going to the Rho conference room though. But you're right. I think Gamma has more of an impact than people realize, but because they don't realize it, I didn't think it was going to resonate in our poll. We shall find out the numbers first. Let's go out to the Greasy as a Meatball. Mr. Meatball, if you have a favorite Greek, have at it. Then more importantly, what do you think our audience is voting for?
Their favorite Greek, huh? The audience is voting for Delta because that's the one they understand. The two that really drive options, though, for guys that really trade are Gamma and Vega. And the ability to make money off of volatility being mispriced is, in my opinion, the best part about options, which is why I'm going to go Vega.
Yeah, that's one of those ones where I'm with you. I think those two tend to be some of the most impactful, but also the least understood. So I didn't think they would resonate that much in our poll. I kind of thought it would be Delta, of course, and then Theta right behind it, and then the other two in some mix. I thought Vega would be beating Gamma, though. I'm surprised that it's not. Delta is running away with it, though, 51.5% right now. Theta, a distant, but still a number 2, 24.2% for Theta. Number 3, Gamma, having a bit of a resurgence, I think, because Brian talked it up. It's up to 13.6%, so still a distant third, but now outpacing Vega. Poor Vega, only 10.6%. No love for Vega. Vega was a clear number 3 for quite a while, and now all of a sudden Gamma having a little bit of life to it. You guys got a few hours left to get in there at options if you haven't done so already. And keep checking at options throughout the week. We usually have a fun question of the week pinned there or scrolling through there somewhere. You could find it. And you could play along with our fun questions because we stopped them for a while. You guys kept saying, bring them back. So we have brought back the questions of the week per your request. Speaking of requests, we got, Luigi's back. My boy Luigi. I love having him in the chat because then I get to say, my boy Luigi. It's just fun to say. He's cheating, Brian. He's got a question for you, but it's more of an OPR question. But I guess he's taking advantage of the fact that you're on Vol Views. He says, I wanted to ask Brian if he has done a show on the straddle strangle swap. You're all fired up about swaps these days, Luigi. He says, it seems like it would be a good earnings play. So, Brian, have you done an OPR on the straddle strangle swap? Luigi wants to know.
Well, Luigi, I'm embarrassed to say that, no, I have not. But I have done more on straddles, I think, than most of the people that have podcasts inside the Options Insider. So I do from a time to time like to just buy a long straddle. And a lot of them that we've talked about, most of the time, those ones have done pretty well on a paper trading basis, just in general. But I've never done a straddle strangle swap around earnings, and I will look into it because I've been doing. Mark, do you know exactly how long we've been doing? I don't even remember anymore.
You're closing in on 400 episodes. You're up to like 380. You're gonna have a 400 episode spectacular soon, sir.
Yeah, so maybe that'll be the straddle strangle swap that we do.
Straddle strangles. I'm trying to think how that would even work, because a straddle with a strangle is, of course, an iron fly. So that could be an iron fly swap, or is it a straddle in 1 month and then, but the strangle's in the same month? It's going to be like an iron fly, right? So you're talking an iron fly swap. I don't know, a straddle strangle swap. I'll need to mull over how that would work. An intriguing question. That's what our listeners are for, to throw us the curveballs here on the show, listeners. As we keep on rolling, it is time, listeners. It is time. Brian seemed a little bit precise at the top of the show. Let's see if his crystal ball is still working as we head on into the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, everybody, welcome to the crystal ball. And at the start of the show, let's see, we had spikes holding right around a 20, and VIX cash got down to about a 19 3/4. And now coming into the end of the show, like I said, UVXY getting a little bit of its juice back, and now we're seeing VIX and spikes getting some of their juice back as well. Spikes is almost up to a 21. It's got about a 20.91 right now. So spikes getting very frothy. And then we've got VIX cash north of the 20 handle again, a little bit north of 20.5, about 20.60 out there. So let's see. We have prognostications all over the place. Let's see. Russell, once again, as he is wont to do last week on the show, was the highest at 1828. He says that was his birthday, 828. Also, ironically, the year he was born, 1828. And then the Rock Lobster was below him at 1799. Weirdly enough, I was the lowest on the totem pole last week at 1745. Clearly, none of us get the winner chicken dinner this week. Let's see if any of our esteemed listeners had anything close here. Oh, looks like JJ was closer at 1965. So he was merely almost a point away in VIX and about a point and a third away in spikes. That's better than any of us, JJ. So well done for you. Everybody else was 16 handle meets 1635. Allen's at a 15.5. Henry was a little closer at 1840, but still not enough. Options queen. Usually your crystal ball is pretty precise. This week you had a 17. So a lot of people were fading. Oh, Luigi was at an 1835 this week. That seemed high at the time, but in retrospect, obviously not enough. Looks like a bunch of others of you had prognostications in the 16 to about 18 range. So unfortunately for all of us, no winner chicken dinner this week. A big swing and a miss for all of us here as we finally get that vol pop everyone's been talking about, but it came pretty late in the week and even indeed late in the trading day. So that's why vol, we've said it before, we'll say it again, it is the most fickle of mistresses out there. It can give and taketh away in the same session. And it is doing so right now. So that means, Brian, all of us whiffed it this week. That means you, as our guest, get the pride place of going first. What are you feeling for this time next week from a vol perspective, sir?
1830. Boom. 1-8.
Oh, just dropped a boom on us, too.
Boom.
Wow. Yeah.
It's got to be precise now. It's got a boom.
Yeah.
All right. 1830.
There's a chance I'm going to win this.
I like it. When it's said with a boom, it's got some authority. Ironically enough, you're 0.05 away from where Luigi was from this week. I always could tell you and Luigi were kind of simpatico there. All right, Mr. Meatball, you didn't guess last week, so you weren't on the show, so you didn't lose. So you get a chance to go next as well. What are you feeling for this time next week, sir?
Well, anytime I'm not on the show, don't we all lose?
Everyone, it's just a big loss for life, sir.
Yes. I think that you're going to see the VIX up on Monday, potentially, and then we will back off. I'm going to say 1830. Boom. I'm going to go even. I'll go 1701.
1701. I noticed there was no boom on that, though. Maybe more of a whimper on that. So 1701 with a whimper, 1830 with a boom. That's a lot of space and a lot to ponder for this time next week. Are we going to maintain this through the weekend? Are we going to get more juice coming in? You usually see a little bit of an inhale on the morning after the weekend in VIX land, or will we see it just get drubbed later on in the session? All these things to parse, and how much will that drubbing continue throughout the week? Will we still see more sell-offs? But sell-offs like we saw earlier this week, where we saw a sell-off, but the vol just laughed at it and continued to sell off even as the market was selling off. A lot of moving pieces to the puzzle here this week, listeners, as I buy myself some time for my prognostication. Ooh, what do I feel in this time next week? You know, I was thinking an 18 handle before Brian threw one out there anyway. I'm going to go, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be the high dog on the totem pole this week. I'm going to say 1876. So 100 years after an awesome year for this here America. So there's your market this week, listeners. 1701 on the dark side for the Meatball. 1830 with a boom for Brian. 1876 for myself there on the off. So I got more listeners coming in. We've got 17 half handles. Oh, you're guessing a VVIX as well, of 109.60. Wow. Very precise predictions. If you get the VVIX, you get bonus points there, Mr. Unlimited. Options Queen's going with 20 handle, 21 and a quarter. My boy Luigi, 19. We got a bunch of guesses coming in. Hit us up, listeners, if you want to play along. If you win, hey, maybe winner chicken dinner for you here on Volatility Views. All right, that music means we have come to the end for Volatility Views. Have come to the end of our regularly scheduled programming. But don't worry, if you're in the secret club, we're not done for you yet. We'll come back in exactly an hour for Options Oddities to break down the crazy week that was and still is in the world of unusual options activity. We're going to talk memes. We're going to talk crazy trades. You guys have a lot of crazy trades you've sent to us saying, hey, what's going on with this? We'll parse all that fun stuff. You never know what's going to go on. Maybe we'll get radioactive again. Uranium has been pretty hot of late on that one. We'll get into that. Seeing a lot of you already in the secret club having fun, making some fun trades around what we're parsing, and so it's been a good time. If you're not part of the secret club yet, you know where to go, theoptionsinsider.com/pro, so you can join us on Oddities for that sweet Blackjack Hall of Fame Pro Q&A coming up next week and a whole bunch more. theoptionsinsider.com/pro. And Mr. Brian, folks I'm sure are already listening to you on OPR, but they want to go above and beyond. They want to check out what you have cooking throughout the week over there at Ally. Where should they go? What should they do?
Well, the best place to go is just follow me on Twitter. It's very simple. It's at my name, at Brian Overby, because whenever we have an event, I usually will tweet it out and let you know all about it. We also have a huge digital conference that's coming up. We're doing one about once a quarter, 3 or 4 times a year nowadays. So you definitely want to check out our YouTube channel and check out my Twitter handle, at Brian Overby. Thanks for the invite, Mark. It was a lot of fun.
There you go. Check him out. Give him a follow on the old Twitters at Brian Overby, Overby. Tweets out a lot of fun stuff throughout the week, including links to his fun show and everything else. And if you're not listening to OPR, what the heck are you doing? It's good stuff there on our Education Wednesday, one of our core Education Wednesday programs. And Mr. Meatball, if they want to check out the Gamma Radar, all the other cool stuff, where should they go? What should they do, sir?
Yeah, hey, come to optionpit.com and just read everything we write. Optionpit.com and read the VIX Edge. I put out VIX content every single stinking day.
I like that. Every single word he writes, you must read, listeners. And the place to go to begin that journey, optionpit.com. And you know where to go to learn more about all things spikes, myxoptions.com/spikes. It's got the quotes there. It's got the releases, which are coming hot and heavy these days as the futures tend to hit many new records. Of course, historical data, and even a link to a cool show called Volatility Views. What more could you possibly ask for from a volatility-oriented destination? myxoptions.com/spikes is the place to go. We got to get on out of here so we can keep rejiggering. Get ready for for Options Oddities. We'll be back again in an hour for those of you in the pro side. Of course, back again next week with all of our regularly scheduled content. And then we'll see you again next Friday, another episode of Volatility Views. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Volatility Views is brought to you by MyAx, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MyAx is proud to bring you Spikes Volatility products. Spikes options and futures are traded on the Spikes Volatility Index, SPIKE, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's Volatility reimagined. Learn more about spikes at myxoptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.